That's right, we have a top story with our very own Alan Adler, and it's going to involve the EV world. We're talking Proterra and Volvo. Alan, thanks for joining us, and what's the latest?
So Friday, we learned that the first auction, there's going to be two of them, but the first auction for the assets of Proterra, the battery making company and transit bus company, the battery assets were sold to Volvo Group, which is fascinating on a number of levels, and I'll try to explain. Proterra went into bankruptcy back in August. They ran out of money. Their loan covenants wouldn't allow them to borrow anymore. So even though they had some money left, which they are operating a business on, they're under protection in Chapter 11. And they had two auctions planned. Both got pushed out a little bit because the bidders wanted more time to do due diligence. So the first of those auctions concluded last week with the $210 million purchase by Volvo Group of the battery assets. Now, this is significant on a number of levels. One, Volvo has its own electrification business that it's running, and Volvo Battery Solutions is part of it. So this coming out of Sweden is not a material matter for Volvo. It's not enough money to really matter. And that in itself, Anthony, speaks to the idea that these assets have been severely devalued. You might call it a fire sale. So you've got a plant in Greer, South Carolina. You've got a battery facility, testing facility in California, and of course all the inventory and so forth that goes with that, plus a lot of pretty high-tech equipment I got a chance to see back in June. That they will be able to make batteries. It's interesting because Daimler Truck and Cummins and PACCAR all went in together in a joint venture in September to make lithium iron phosphate batteries in the U.S. beginning in 2027. They'll work with a Chinese tech supplier to do that. Volvo wasn't part of that. Volvo now has all these assets, and this is a little similar, and I don't want to get too confusing here. It's a little similar to what Nikola did when they purchased Romeo Power to get access to the batteries that they needed. That didn't go very well, and we've, of course, talked about that a lot. But for Volvo, they have clients, though, that include their rivals like Daimler Truck, and Nikola's in there too. So.
Yeah, Alan, that's the interesting thing, right? You mentioned in your article that it looks like jobs are safe, but you've got the awkward conversation coming down the pipeline of, okay, these customer contracts, and what does that mean for them? Because as you mentioned, Volvo is entangled with a lot of the other groups in the industry who do similar or now the same exact thing as they do. When they're looking at this, you mentioned that it's kind of a blip on the radar money-wise, but is it going to be the bigger shockwaves is by the way that they navigate these customer contracts and kind of integrating them now into their supplier structure?
Well, it's as they always say in these things, Kaylee, it's too soon to know what's going to happen in these contracts. But, Nikola said from the outset that they were not going to basically become a merchant of batteries. That's the way they put it. And ultimately, a couple of their clients, Lightning eMotors and Lion Electric, both sort of got left holding the bag. No batteries and basically, contract disputes. PACCAR even was a client of Romeo at one point. I realize we're not talking about Romeo today, but this is the history. This is sort of the predecessing that I think matters when we talk about what could happen here. Now, it's interesting because Volvo and Daimler do cooperate on fuel cells. They have a joint venture there. So partnerships throughout the industry can look kind of weird at times. It'll be interesting to see what happens, though, because we're running out of, at least for the moment, battery suppliers for some of these ventures. Proterra provided batteries for Freightliner custom chassis and also for the electric school buses that Thomas Built Bus makes. So those are two things where, they may need new suppliers, they may not. Now, it's interesting because the former Daimler North America CEO, Roger Nielsen, is the chairman of Proterra. So it's fascinating to see what will happen. We also have one more auction, should learn the outcome today for the transit bus business. The $210 million is not an impressive number, given that this is once a company, Proterra, that was valued at about $1.6 billion. But the bus business, which is their legacy and goes back to 2004, is another piece. So it'll be interesting to see if there are bidders for it and who they are. A couple names come to mind. Gillig, which makes electric buses out in California, is one. And then, Cummins could come into this in some fashion too, because they provide a lot of the buses for Gillig. So.
And Alan, of course, this is a big story here, and we're also talking about what happened with Daimler and that joint venture there, as mentioned earlier. Are there any other potential partnerships that would make sense moving forward or that wouldn't come as too much of a surprise for you in the upcoming year or so?
Well, I think partnership, and we talked about this Friday or Thursday when I was with you in Chattanooga, and I think partnership is probably the word to watch in the coming year. Very few people are able, either financially or from a commitment standpoint, to do a lot of these things alone. And so I think the idea is you partner up where it makes sense, and you try to get things done. You get your costs down that way. You share, the offtake of whatever it is that you're making, whether it's hydrogen or whether it's, batteries or megawatt charging, whatever it might be. I think you're going to see more and more partnerships. I can't name them for you today, but they do come up, don't they?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And you mentioned that you were in Chattanooga with us for F3 last week, but now we're playing Where in the World is Alan Adler? You're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, home of Torque Robotics now.
Red and green. Red and green.
There you go.
Right?
You're there to check out, I assume, some updates going on with Torque Robotics, right? Can you tell us what you're there to cover?
Yeah, they've got a couple of days that they want to spend with us and give us a full update on what's happening with them. When we did our sort of rundown of strong players and weak players and not any more players a few weeks ago in autonomous, we put Torque in the upper group. One, because they're backed by Daimler Truck, right? So money is not an issue for them. They'll have all the resources they need, and they've been perhaps a little more quiet in certain ways. They push. They're talking commercialization in 2027. We've got a couple of players in Aurora and Kodiak that are looking at late 2024 to have a commercial route. So we'll get an update on what they're doing. I think since I was here last, I'm trying to remember how long ago that was, about maybe a year and a half. I think that they have come a long, long way in terms of what they're doing. So it's going to be exciting to see what they're up to. We do have some of the Daimler folks, like Joanna Butler is here. She's the head of autonomous for Daimler, and hope to have her. And we'll try to get together a good show for Wednesday's Truck Tech.
And Alan, as we mentioned, you were able to catch the final half of F3. Can you give us a quick tidbit of maybe a session that you were able to catch or anything like that from the experience here in Chattanooga?
Well, I really was there for a very short time and had breaking news all around me at the time. But I did listen in on one of the fireside chats and wrote about it that Rachel Premack did, and I thought it was interesting because sometimes the most basic instructions, the most common sense things are the sorts of things that you have to repeat, because this idea of relationships for small carriers was the subject, and how do they work on that, and the answers were so basic as to be like, duh, how come I didn't think of that? Or maybe I just thought I could do more. And I thought that it was an interesting panel there. I really didn't get much chance to see or do other things, though.
Well, Alan, we were glad to see you in Chattanooga and hope that you have safe travels wherever they take you next. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.